So you mentioned that you're affected by PTSD. Um, can you share a bit about how you came to be diagnosed or how you came to find out? And yeah, so just the if you could share like the diagnosis
Sure.
or some of the details about how you found
I was first diagnosed with PTSD in about 2001. By that time, I'd served, a number of tours overseas, and my family life wasn't so hot. I was having troubles in my marriage. I was having troubles at work. I was drinking too much. I was doing risky behaviors. And these were all a result of not facing the fact that you're affected by what happens to you. Overseas is a very challenging and often disturbing environment. And I think what most affected me and what led to the PTSD is the fact that I couldn't change the big picture. You go overseas, you're there for 6 months, and then you turn on the TV and things end up being the same back at the place where you just left. And you don't see a real sense of accomplishment. And it's natural, as hard as we want to be, we're airborne, hardcore infantry, you're affected by it because you're a compassionate human being, as most people are. And it's difficult to see a lot of suffering and not be affected by it yourself. It's a completely normal reaction to it. So after being diagnosed in 2001, I didn't really seek effective treatment at that time. And my life continued to be very difficult. I was very difficult as a husband, I know that. And by the time I left the military in 2004, I was ready for it. But I was leaving the military for the wrong reason. I was leaving to escape what was going on in my mind, not necessarily what was going on in my life. And that's what I think is common among a lot of folks that suffer from it, is that they have a sense of displacement. They want to be happy, they should be happy, but for some reason they're not happy. And that comes from your experiences and the fact that you haven't really talked about your problems as you should have, and you haven't dove in deep enough into them to seek a solution.
And it's funny you say that you left angry, and I had considered leaving soon after my diagnosis because I was angry, and I kicked around that idea. I had a plan that was exceptionally poor, so I'm very glad I didn't try and execute it. But what I noticed on the tail end was when I left the combat arms environment, particularly, and then when I left the forces again. There's that thought that, well, I'm taking myself out of that, so this will be better. But I found my symptoms actually got so much worse. And did you find that? So you got out, went to Germany in 2004. You said you almost immediately went to Germany. And,
right.
I know just in our discussions you said you started to have troubles there. Did you notice, like, was it very quickly, like there was an onset of other symptoms? Or
I would have to say I made a rash decision to leave the military. I did it on my birthday, my 40th birthday in 2004. I wrote up a memo to the CEO saying I want out. It was 3 a.m. And that's a pretty rational thing to do. And I handed it in, and I insisted that it was what I want to do, despite a lot of good people trying to talk me out of it. But it seemed to me that it was time to leave. And what I was in fact doing was escaping. I was escaping my symptoms, which I thought were due to what I was in the moment I was in then. Everything's difficult overseas. There's a lot of challenges. But what I was really battling with was my own mind. I was battling with the sense of depression, the strong sense of depression I had. And when I moved to Germany, it got worse. I didn't have my social network. I didn't even tell some of my good friends I was going. And I kind of divorced myself from that previous Frank Moses, who was, the infantry guy. And I dove into teaching, and I did well. I taught English business English at places like Bosch and Chrysler, Daimler Chrysler, and places like that. But I wasn't there. I kind of consider it, for the time I spent in Germany, lost years, because I was in a fugue state. It was kind of like a sad, depressed state that was very difficult to climb out of. I did my best, but I wasn't getting treatment like I needed. I wasn't talking to my friends that I had for years. I wasn't doing any of the stuff that you're supposed to do to, face what's going on with you and get help for it.
So you have shared some of the struggles and difficulties. Are there any other struggles and difficulties you've encountered since you left the forces that you notice in your day-to-day life?
Well, I have to say I've had 8 friends that have committed suicide due to their service. Good guys. Every single last one of them were good men. Some with families and children. Others maybe younger, loners, single. But the common thing about it all is that you're surprised by it until you realize that they too were suffering from PTSD or deep depression or another operational stress injury that they ended up not being able to deal with, and they took that decision because they weren't in the state of mind to want to survive. And that's the saddest part of it. They weren't in the state of mind where they wanted to live.
I've definitely noticed in doing this work over the last year and being vocal about it, PTSD and the idea of suicide. And I've had a lot of heroes and mentors, and you said about they're good people, the good men and are good soldiers or just good people that you don't expect it from.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think all of us are very good at giving that air of strength and confidence, particularly when we don't have it. And in fact, we probably give it off more when we don't have it. But I've definitely noticed that a lot of people they're the people you never wanted to let down, and they're the people you never shared because you didn't want to let them down, or you didn't want to appear to not be able to function in front of them.
Yeah.
But how widespread it is through all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have this role that we want to play. A lot of it's due to what societal expectations are for men. What our expectations are for ourselves is, like a paratrooper, supposed to be hard, tough, smart-ish. But what we don't really accept is that there's limits to everybody's capacity to deal with pain and to deal with trauma and to deal with sadness and to deal with depression. And so many people, men and women, turn to alcohol, drug abuse, gambling, spending money like it's going out of style. They're just searching for something to take that pain away. And I too, spent too much money in my first marriage. I was a horrible husband. I dealt with my issues as if they were something that I could avoid, as opposed to something I had to face head on and change, because they can turn you into a person that's not pleasant to be around, a person that's actually not a good person, if you let it carry on long enough, and if you don't deal with it and admit that you have issues.
So the struggles and the difficulties you've had with your post-traumatic stress disorder, what effect have you noticed on people close to you, especially friends and family, especially those who don't serve?
Well, people that don't serve, there's a lot of information out there if people want to seek it, but there's a bit of, we lost a lot of folks, especially Afghanistan, for instance. I never served there, but there's 168 that died there. I think that kind of woke society up to the fact that the Army actually is a fighting force, that the Army actually does suffer casualties, and that it's something that can be a dangerous sort of occupation to have. But you can't understand what is going on in someone's mind unless the same thing has gone on in your own mind, perhaps. And that's why it's so important to reach out to people that need the help. Give them a call. Pick up the phone when they call and have a chat with them. Because I did some of that when I was going through my troubles with friends, and it immensely helped me. It really did.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's part of the reason, well, it's probably the entire reason I started doing this was because I saw that isolation coming. I saw it happening, and I had to do something to the immediate response. I left the forces, life fell apart. The immediate response was to withdraw even further and isolate even further. And it's a very appealing thing.
It is.
And it's also probably, I know for me it would have been the very worst thing. But yeah, we hear that over and over, that withdrawal.
Well, there's an expression, there's no more companionable a companion than solitude. But that's only true if you're in the right state of mind.
Yeah. No, and it's very true. And if, the problem with that solitude under stress is there's only one form of counsel, and that's your own. And whatever's in your mind, whatever your mind latches onto as a course of action or a reasoning, is unfortunately going to be the only voice you're hearing. And I've definitely experienced that. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But then again, yeah, the solitude at the right time, the right setting is incredible. It's an incredible mechanism for introspection and healing, but it has to be tempered. And I've always recognized that, but I'll let that go into hyperactive mode, and I'll be no, I'm not escaping. I'm just introspecting.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely it's definitely an easy trap to fall into, like anything in moderation and awareness. Okay, and on with partners, spouses, and kids, what effects did you notice about your struggles upon them?
Well, I think it's a common thing, and the people I've talked to that were in the same situation as me, there's that uncontrolled outburst, the anger, the lack of compassion even sometimes for the struggles that your wife may have faced while you were away overseas. I mean, we come back, but they were there in a home alone, and they too suffer for lack of companionship, and they suffer for the fact that their man or their spouse is gone for 6 months or more. I'd have to say that in my current relationship, my wife too was ex-armed forces. She too suffers from PTSD. Kind of almost the perfect partner to have. She's a very loving, wonderful woman, very supportive, and I too am supportive of her. And we found each other almost by chance, but we became soulmates over our shared circumstances, if you will, and are very, very close for it. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to say at my age, that I found somebody that I am going to spend the rest of my life with, right? And the common thread with us is the fact that we were armed forces. We both like to ride motorcycles. We are kind of the same person in a way. But for my previous relationship, yeah, I was kind of an ass. I was unfaithful. I was drinking too much. I was spending too much. I wasn't spending us into ruination, but it was pretty close at times. So yeah, and that's not an uncommon thing. I hear that a lot. Like people, marriages fall apart for love and money. But I wasn't doing myself or my previous spouse any favors by not seeking the treatment I needed, because I could have been a much better person a lot earlier had I admitted to myself that I needed help and actually sought it out and dealt with the issues as I recognized I had them and others recognized I had them as well.